have the option to buy shares, and they did, and so that kind of infused the company with some cash.
Right.
And what the company has said is that this essentially gives them a runway until the middle of 2026.
Okay, so they've got a bit of breathing room
Yeah,
here.
they've got some time to actually, execute on their plan.
Right.
But, another thing that came out of that earnings call was that they were talking about the progress that they're making on their NVIDIA Connect program, and then also their BNA platform, which is a big part of what they do. But it doesn't seem like there's been anything really new since that March 28th date when the stock price started to go down.
So that could be part of what's driving that downward pressure. The fact that there hasn't been a lot of, fresh news.
Right.
Because, particularly in a sector like biotech, the market really thrives on news flow.
Right.
Positive data, partnerships, regulatory development. So if there's a bit of a vacuum there, that can sometimes weigh on the stock price.
Right. So maybe they're just in a little bit of a holding pattern right now.
Yeah, perhaps. And it's possible that, the market is waiting for that next significant announcement, whether it's, some positive data readout from one of their trials related to the BNA platform, maybe a major partnership agreement.
Yeah.
Or even some sort of progress on the regulatory front.
Right. Because all of those things could kind of inject some life back into it.
Exactly. It's all about catalysts.
Yeah.
What's going to drive that next move. And I think, without that fresh information to kind of, generate excitement, validate that longer term optimism, sometimes a stock can, stagnate or become a little bit more vulnerable to just broader market trends.
So putting it all together for AIFF,
Yeah.
it seems like there's this underlying optimism that is reflected in, those 3-month predictions. But the short-term trends are kind of raising a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
And the absence of news, it could be contributing to, that hesitancy that the market seems to be displaying.
Absolutely. And, the key question really is what kind of event would be the catalyst to kind of reignite that positive momentum.
Yeah.
And bridge that gap between, the short-term concerns and the longer-term hopes.
Right. And, what kind of news could come out? Would it be, some positive trial results or?
Yeah, exactly. Or would it be some strategic collaboration with a, major player in the industry?
Right.
Or would it be, some kind of breakthrough on their technology? Or, any of those things could potentially be the catalyst. But until then.
Yeah, we just kind of have to wait and see.
Exactly. Watch and wait and see what unfolds.
Okay, so why don't we shift gears a little bit and move on to CORT, Corcept Therapeutics.
Okay.
And this one has a little bit more of a dramatic story, I would say.
Okay.
So the stock price actually surged to $114.22.
Wow.